not working for me.
My camera, the celebrities. I don't know, Alita. I mean, we're in the presence here of a politician from the north, David Freiheit. Now he's MP Freiheit in waiting. And don't laugh too hard there, NYT Nate.
Oh yeah.
How are you doing?
I am well. I am well. How's everybody else doing over here? I see everybody. It's all smiles and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure that I can get you guys on while I'm still cool enough to know you. You know, I mean, you leaving me behind.
Sit with the next prime minister here.
Yeah, no. We'll see. I was looking at the stats. My riding has gone liberal since 1981, with the exception of 1 year where it went to the New Democratic NDP. I think it went to the NDP once in like 2011. And when it goes liberal, it's been 53% liberal for the last two elections, and liberal since it is. We'll see. Who knows?
Well, 53% liberal is actually a good shot. Like here in New York, it's like 80 or 90% liberal. Well, we had two Republican mayors back to back.
Well, it's 53% liberal, which doesn't include. There's like six. I don't know how many parties there are. You had the Green Party, the NDP. You have other parties which I guess are some variation of liberal as well. But like I say, this is not a question of political affiliation. This is a question of principle. We'll get there. Make sure you
Eldon has advice for you. Make sure you announce yourself as pro-gay marriage, pro-trans rights, and pro-civil rights, so they can't Trumpify you. And of course, you got to march all over C-16.
This is where there's going to be legitimate discussion, is when you are pro-trans rights to the point where they trump, to use the pun, women's rights. I mean, that's the discussion that has to be had, because at one point people are going to have to realize that if you say you're pro-trans rights with respect to sports, for example, you are now encroaching on women's rights, and you have to appreciate that interplay and figure out which side of the debate you want to be on that.
And so, right to Alita.
Hello, resident woman here.
Uncomfortably.
No, I definitely agree. I mean, that's an uncomfortable part of the discussion having to do with trans rights, is how it affects mostly women, because the discussions, it usually has to do with sports, and that's because that is where you have a distinction between men and women along physical lines, right? So you have, you have men in a different category than women. And the whole purpose of that is so that, women can actually compete. Because otherwise, if it was, all of the world sprinters together in the Olympics, there would be no women at the Olympics. It would be Usain Bolt against everyone else. And, who knows how many, fractional women would actually even make the team. So, so I definitely understand that is a huge, kind of asterisk for a lot of women is how that places them, and usually in these kind of like physical roles, because when we're talking about positions that have to do with intellect, with other kinds of skills that aren't so physical, it's not so much of a difference, I think. But yeah.
Well, what's interesting? Go ahead, Nate.
No, I'm going to be the most hated person in the room here, but I'm going to just say it. There's no way I think a trans woman should be competing with women because it just to me, it just doesn't make sense. I do understand there's two arguments here. There's one argument about people being treated right in the social society, people being able to use whatever bathrooms. That's separate from like Joe, I don't know. There was a MMA fighter who was trans, who was fighting against women. And that fighter was almost killing those women. I'm talking about, it was ridiculous.
An orbital socket.
It was like ridiculous.
Crack the skull.
It was like ridiculous. And we all understand there are biological differences between the sexes. And like Alita just pointed to, when you're talking about things like, mental capacity and things, we're not talking about that. We're just talking about the natural differences of men being able to run faster and things of that nature. And to try to ignore that and to try to say, well, that's not a thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm as liberal as they come, but I think that's wrong. Like, I remember I was watching a video about, there was a lawsuit in Connecticut that I was going to cover, where the young woman was suing the school board because it was like, if you make it in the top 4, then you go to the nationals. And they had two young men who just literally said, well, we're identifying as women, and then went and broke all the women's records for all for that whole state, and they had taken the place of two women who were on that team, and I don't think that's right, and I understand that people are going to feel upset about that, but that but it
then why have Title IX?
Yeah, and you can't just say I'm a woman and then compete against women, and then it's just not fair fundamentally.
It's even more. It's more complicated, or I say more obvious than that, is that even the rules they enact at the Olympics, where they set testosterone threshold levels, implicitly recognizes the biological difference between biological males and biological females. And it implicitly recognizes the biological advantage that comes from testosterone levels, which is why they have to set a level in order to counter what they recognize as being a biological what's the word I'm looking for? When you have something advantage, a biological advantage for biological males. And so they make a threshold, which itself it acknowledges the difference. It tries to respond to it, but in a way that is still fundamentally unfair, in that the threshold for testosterone is still higher than that which would otherwise be found in a biological female. So they recognize the differences, they recognize the advantages, and they just try to craft rules around it for what is ultimately the anomaly and not the rule. And so there has to be another way. But above and beyond that, there has to be a way to do it that respects women's rights, because yes, it is. We've seen it in real time, the results that happen. And it's not a question of discrimination. It's a question of respecting the rights that were established to protect a group, women, biological women.
I've got something to throw in, though, that is an oddity, because you're talking about running, for example. I'm a lapsed runner. That's one place where, I don't know if you knew this, but the odds or the differences even out over distance. If you look at like the Moab or the extremely long ultra running events, you're finding women are actually winning over the men, because these are open, categories. And yeah, women are judged against each other, but overall winners are women, not unfrequently. Same thing with like Western states. When you get into 100 miles and things like that, women are very, very strong when it comes to endurance events. And
but that's the point is that there are going to be there are anomalies, right? And women are better at things than men. It's just a natural way things work. But if we're talking about the majority of Olympic sports, the reason why you do have these separate events is because we understand there's a difference. It's funny because they've done a whole study where they said, the theoretically fastest woman in the world wouldn't qualify for the Olympics on the men's side. You know what I'm saying? It's things like that. Even Serena Williams, he said that she's the greatest women's tennis player ever, and she said that she against like a guy who doesn't even make it to the
or top high school,
who's not even ranked. Yeah, she wouldn't even get one set against him. And it's not to say that's not competition, but just to understand there are differences, and unless we're able to even them out in some way, then
that's what I pointed out. Nate. What about different sports? There has been an argument, and I think it would be interesting to explore sometime, that the sports were developed for men that you see in the Olympics.
That's true.
And
yes.
What if you explore other options, like equestrian sports? Women are completely equal, often better. Water polo, well, to a point. Emily was, talking about that.
Marksmanship. I mean, I don't know that there would be any
marksmanship.
Sure. Oh no, women generally are better at marksmanship. I found out from being in the Army.
That is
true. And part of it is I'm generalizing, but they tended to follow directions better.
Oh, Eric, you are in so much trouble now.
Well, my wife would disagree. I never follow directions.
Yeah, me neither.
Oh no, it's we're going to see what happens, because it's a question. The one issue is it's become the political litmus test. I think in a manufactured way, because we're not dealing. It's an exceptional occurrence, and it has been turned into a political litmus test, which is typically how these things work. Is you take the exception, which is an outlier example, and make it the bottom line standard test to further divide people. But no. Somebody wrote Billie Jean King. No, I'm saying this is what Serena Williams said. I was quoting Serena. Serena said this, not me. So Billie Jean King, she did, but
I can't remember who she competed against. I don't know that the person she competed against was in the peak of playing. I don't think she competed against John McEnroe or whoever was the contemporary champion. In fairness, so it's like, all of them would beat my ass. Well, most high school women would be yes. But I mean,
look, it is. People are going to have the more there's a discussion, the more people are going to have to recognize the flaws in the reasoning. Because if there were no biological advantage, they wouldn't set testosterone thresholds. And
55-year-old Bobby Riggs, 55-year-old Bobby Riggs. I'm going to say that there were maybe other factors there. I don't want to be ageist here.
Yeah.
But, I am 51 now, so I can get closer and just say, look, 55 does make a difference.
Did anyone know in the chat, because I'm looking at Dan Cooper's comment, but I like the history of darts, because I've always wondered, I watch a lot of darts and I've only seen a woman appear twice, I think, because the announcers make such a big deal of it. So I don't think there's any actual gender prohibitions in darts, but I don't know who the best female darts player of all time was. And then it goes back to the question, like in chess, is it a question of culture versus skill on certain games? But on other things where it relies on biological indications, biological traits, you can't have the argument. It's not for anyone who says follow the science, that the science is there. So it is just a question of politics at some point.
Yeah, that's the liberal.
I think
you can jump in.
One thing that I want to say. Oh, so I muted myself because I created the puppy beforehand because my husband's not here, and so I'm sorry. I see it in the chat. People are asking whose dog is whining. I'm sorry, that's mine. And I couldn't. If I let her in, it would just be total chaos. No, I think one other part of this discussion that I think should be pointed out though is also the role that hormone treatments play in sort of balancing those. I'm admittedly not I'm not well read enough on the subject to really be able to say one way or another, but I have read, it was a while ago, so I don't really remember too much of it, but I have read that hormone treatments do also help to sort of even out those disparities because for example like bone density, hormones have an effect on that. So men's bones will be a little more dense than women's, or your muscular structure and all that kind of stuff. Now, I mean, I don't know how that affects things like your center of gravity, how for, women tend to have it in the hips, men tend to have it in the shoulders, things like that can have an impact. But I do understand that at least can alleviate some of those issues, or at least that's what various scientists have said, and whatever, however we want to, trust the scientists on that.
The one thing about having this discussion is that whenever I say I don't agree with this, with having trans women compete with biological women, the first thing they'll say is you're a bigot, you're this, you're that. It always goes, it always goes, I'm against. And then you say, no. I believe they should have equal rights. I believe in all that other stuff, but I just don't think this is fair. So that's the problem with having this conversation. And then when you start talking about let's follow the science, then it's okay. Well, we don't want to follow the science. So it's like on the left, it's like we'll follow the science until it disagrees with us. Then we don't like the science too much. It's about rights. And I think at the end of the day, when you're talking about this, it's also puberty too has an issue with it. If you have a male go through puberty, then you're going to have better bone density. You're going to have and those things are harder to compensate for later in life. And then you get to the problem where do you start the hormone treatments before puberty? Then it gets to the point where does you're changing this person's gender, and they may not know. So there are so many topics in this, but I do want to ask you guys, what about the opposite side? Because the other way is just not allowing transgendered men or women compete in these particular sports. Is that also fair? What's the happy median here? Because I don't think that's fair either, but then I don't think it's also fair to have them compete with this particular unfair advantage.
How about trans versus trans? And there you go. You have a third category.
The argument is going to be obviously there's not enough to create a class,
right.
A weight class, whatever. So, but I would say instead you could go instead of male versus female. I forget which one is XX and which one is XY. There are non-gender construct ways of distinguishing the sexes, and it's XX and XY chromosomes. So just create the categories by chromosome, and nobody can
The
have
XX Games, Viva Frei.
Yes. Just as long as there's no typo in adding another X, that'll save some embarrassment.
Well, that's the sport everyone can participate in. Thank you very much.
XXY.
I say that out loud as a joke. I think they actually did have that as a dirty idea for other audiences.
I'm sure.
But no, dude, it goes that way. And what I've never agreed with is not allowing participation. Oh, we still hear you.
Muted along with the camera.
I've never understood not allowing the participation where there is no biological advantage. So, when I remember taking issue with Vijay Singh being against Annika Sorenstam playing golf with the boys. Like there, in certain sports, I don't understand the distinction. But where the division was created to protect those who are biologically created differently, you're undoing rights and you're not creating new rights by doing this.
Oh, hold on. I got to interrupt this broadcast with the drop that was created for me on Locals, unstructured.locals.com. And it's a particular event that seems to happen all the time in live streams, especially with, shall we say, future Canadian politicians and New York Times lawyers. And that is this.
Oh,
what I
no.
love is you muted me as you did it, so I couldn't even talk over it.
No, it does it automatically in StreamYard when you play
I love
it.
that drop. That drop is amazing, and you now have some production value, which is competing with Howard Stern, Eric.
That's Tape Damage in my Locals community. The dude's amazing. He's made like a little video game thing, and I'm just amazing, cool stuff. But I'm telling you, hopefully I can retire the drop someday, YouTube.
Well, I got it halfway through the Alex Jones live stream, and after we were finished, I reviewed it to make sure and asked for a manual review, and they remonetized with the Voldemort of YouTube, which I was very, very surprised about, actually.
You and Tim Pool.
Yeah, well, no, I don't know if Tim Pool actually asked for the remonetization. I said I struggled with it for a bit because I said maybe even just the name is enough, but the subject matter of that stream was nothing that I thought was out of bounds for monetization.
It was great watching, though. You look like a hostage video at points.
Well, because you're watching, so you want to be respectful. You want to let the guests talk, but my goodness, you could see the way Alex goes on, and he goes on tangents which are very interesting. But I wanted to get to know things that we had not yet heard, as opposed to things we've already heard somewhere.
Yeah. It's a great episode, seriously.
Yeah, that is a very good episode. Yeah, you got to definitely. You're missing it if you haven't checked it out.
Well, but now speaking of which, Nate, and episodes, let's talk about the New York Times article. And my good front page New York Times, for good reasons, is very hard to do these days.
I think most important is the fact that you've been outed with your last name.
That's true.
Broady or Broady, or how do you say it now?
Well, it's a weird story. Well, the way you pronounce it is Broady, but but it's a weird story. My family's name is actually spelled Broady, the way I spell it, Nate Broady. That's my family's name. So my family's from Baltimore and from the South. Actually, it's funny because my grandfather's half white, so it's like I have a whole plethora of people with this type of name. But when my grandfather was in the army, they misspelled his name on one of his checks. And from that point on, he tried to get it changed to, he's like, that's not my name. He tried to get it changed, and they were like, well, we'll change it. And they just never changed it. So he was like, listen, I'm not going to wait 2 months for my check. So he just kept cashing the checks. So then when he got out the army, all his ID and everything just had this new name on it. So he was like, well, F it. I'm just going to use it. So for that point on, so when he got married, that was his name. When he had kids, that was his name. And then that's how the name got, and that's why it's so unique. It was just like, so I just use the family name for Broady. And there's like a clothing store down there and everything. So it's interesting. So.
Oh my God. So I've a lot of members of my family have served. I'm a military spouse, so I love, the United States military, but that story does not surprise me at all. knowing all of the frustrations that go on with a very big, military force, and how administratively things can be very frustrating and all kinds of like stupid changes can happen. That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
Yeah, yeah, but this is back in World War II and stuff. It's like, well, all right, you know what? Just keep this, because again, you want to get paid. So he's like, yeah, I just want to keep my paycheck. So that's the spelling. But the whole New York Times thing was just I don't know. It's something that happened 2 years ago. And Viva knows about it because I was talking to Viva when it was happening. But it was it was just a classic story of taking someone's case pro bono, someone who didn't, couldn't afford an attorney. The state was coming down on them pretty hard, and it's interesting because I didn't expect this case to give me any notoriety. I didn't expect this case to have anything to come from it, and for it to be in the front page of New York Times, which is kind of like, wow, you never know. And a lot of people say no good deed goes unpunished, and that's exactly what happened here. It was a good deed, but it turned out to be something. So I'm grateful for it.
Well, it is amazing. Well, you have to tell the story, Nate, because I will screw it up if I try.
Well, so what happens is that a group of friends, four group of friends, they go to a club in Brooklyn, and in that club, one of the group, there were 2 women and 2 men. One of the women says that while she was in the club, she was sexually assaulted by one of the men in the restroom. After that assault, she doesn't tell anybody. The guy then says, hey, why don't we go back to my place? So her friend, so the 4 jump into a car, Uber, and then go back to the person who just committed the sexual assault, his place. They go up to the dorm room, and there's like a living room area, and then she then goes into his bedroom with him alone. After a while, there's my client hears screams in that particular room. So he goes and he opens up the door. It's like, what's going on in here? She comes out the bathroom and she has the phone and she says, hey, this happened to, this guy sexually assaulted me. He filmed it. I fell asleep and he was doing this. So my client sees it, and the blankist, the rapist, he then tries to grab the phone to erase the video. He tries to grab it, but it was actually his phone. So he tries to grab the phone from my guy. There was a struggle. My guy happens to be an MMA. He's a amateur MMA fighter, so it didn't go well for the for the rapist. And when the police get there, my guy's arrested for assault. It started as felony assault, then it became misdemeanor assault, and that's when I got involved. So come to find out, during the investigation, the New York City Police Department didn't, when they investigated the case, they just said, okay, this was an assault case. We're going to leave it at that. But in New York, all of the schools here are also law enforcement agents. Just like we have hospital police, we have campus police, we have parks police, just like most other cities, they have it. So you have the street police, which is NYPD, but we have a whole bunch of different policing agencies. So the campus police did a follow-up investigation and found not only that this woman, that this was an assault, this was sexual assault, but then they found on his phone, after they arrested him, they found multiple videos of him having sex with unconscious women. So there were a multitude of videos with that.
Bill Cosby Young.
Yes, Bill Cosby Young. So they had the video. They asked my client to come in, so we were interviewed by the officers there, and they arrested him. And then the DA's office charged him with the sexual assault. He also then confessed to the sexual assault in front of a room full of like 20 people. He also was recorded confessing to the sexual assault on a staged phone call with the victim. So what the police department does, they'll have the victim call the rapist, and then they'll have a conversation, and on that conversation he confessed to the sexual assault. Yeah, I had sex with you while you're sleeping. Now the law is generally, if somebody is unconscious, you can't have sex with them. That's, they can't give consent.
It's impossible to give consent. Yeah.
Yes, but in this particular case, so 2 other women did come forward to the campus police, and so we thought we had a great thing. A great case. So I assumed that our case was going to get dropped, but in a shocking development, the district attorney's office dropped the case against the rapist, like a full dismissal. They just said, we're not going to prosecute the rapist, and then said they're going to prosecute my guy for assaulting the rapist. So we had like this huge, so there became a huge fight between me and the district attorney's office. So I went to the DA's office and I said, well, listen, Since you're not going to prosecute this guy for rape and you're going to prosecute my guy, we're going, not only we're going to go to trial, but I'm going to prove to everyone in trial that that guy's a rapist, because I got victims who are willing to testify against this guy that he's done this. And, you know, so we got this. So the DA's office got scared. They were like, oh my God. So I had them speak to all. So I had to do like a separate investigation. Now the sucks thing is that this is a pro bono case. So I'm doing all these billable hours investigating this case. So I'm talking to cops, I'm talking to witnesses. So I got all this evidence. So I turned it over to the DA's office, and they didn't drop the case against my guy. So they dropped. So they said, okay, we're going to give him a full dismissal, but you have to do, 2 days of community service. So my guy takes that deal because he doesn't want to continue to go back, obviously, and forth the courts. He takes the deal. He's got a full dismissal, sealed. Everything is done. He's happy. But then the New York Times gets involved, and they say, well, hold on. If you have these confessions and you have all these multiple victims, what happened? So they started investigating, and then they've come to find out the video disappeared. The video with the cops had disappeared. The DA's office essentially said they made a mistake. They should have prosecuted him for all of these sexual assaults, but they didn't, and it was more or less their bad. So so that's what happened at the end.
And an extra element, Nate, do I understand correctly that as of the time you notified them and they had all this information, apparently subsequent to that, the person had assaulted other people, so that there were...
Yes. There was somebody else actually. And it was interesting because at first they said I didn't tell them. But in court, you write motions. So I had a motion to dismiss, and I put all this evidence in front of the court as in a motion. So when the New York Times got the motion, they were like, no. Not only did he tell you, he literally put it here all in the motion. And here's all the evidence. And here's the people to call. So then the DA's office kind of hands were tied. They were like, oh, shit, we can't say he didn't tell us because he did. He told everybody. So... and my client was happy and everybody was happy. And it's unfortunate, but it's just, it's the way the system works sometimes. And one thing it also brings me back to is that I know I give Barnes and Viva grief all the time about, how I'm so, I love the system, but understand this. They are right most of the time. When they say you can't trust the system, you can't trust these people, they are right. Sometimes I am too naive. And I understand that because I do have a sometimes unbiased trust to the system. But, I'm learning to be less trustful. But situations like this do happen. And I've been a part of many of them. So.
No, that's amazing. I'm just looking at what's happening with the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot. And like,
I love how you say Whitmer.
Whitmer.
Cool whip. It's cool. You're saying it funny. No, I don't say it to make fun of the names. Stetler, it's ingrained in my head and it comes out like that. So there's no point fighting it. But Nate, I don't think I ever distrusted the system fundamentally until I started, covering it. And now I think to approach it with fundamental distrust is the requisite, because that allows you to dissect and analyze with a certain degree of objectivity to make sure that there's no rampant abuse, which they've grown accustomed to. Watching this Whitmer thing and now, applying it mutatis mutandis to January 6th, man, it's nuts. And then you reread the left BuzzFeed article on the subject, and you appreciate that what I initially took as outrage from BuzzFeed is actually just trying to normalize this behavior, normalize this entrapment, slowly and surely, the same way that Times article was just trying to normalize fortification. And I mean, maybe I'm poisoned now, but once you see it, you can never unsee it in all circumstances.
That's true. That's true. It's what happens is that, like, when I was working at the DA's office and when I was in law enforcement, I know for a fact we all really tried to do the right thing, right? We were like those cops when they were calling me racist, right? I'm out there in the protest, they're calling me a racist. They the guy saying, hey, you want to just lock up black people? I'm like, what are you talking about? How can I just want to lock up black people, right? It gets sick, but there are bad actors. And I think we have to be skeptical because we give the government too much power not to be skeptical. And that's the way that I'm starting to approach it now. Especially like and a lot of times things change because it sounds bad, but you can't trust anybody. Like me and Alita doing the video on the soccer stuff. You can't like the whole media is just straight up lying to us now. It's just like who can you trust if you can't trust the people who supposedly are there to be checks on the government, right? The media is supposed to be a check on the government. They don't do that. The government's supposed to check the
candidate Freiheit.
Yes, this guy.
And that's only taken 6 years of total transparency to know that like, I don't hide very much. But no, it's
But when you get the power, though, it's gonna be different because don't forget, it's who says it best? I forgot the YouTube channel who says it best. He says a lot of people think they can change the power with the way it works, but when you get there, that power changes you. Because now you have it and now you wield it. So it's not about you getting the power. You're going to do it. It's that power is going to change who you are and how you operate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Barnes said, I don't think he said it the first, but he says it the best. You know, two things change character: failure and success, and how one deals with failure and how one deals with power. But what was the other thing? No, that was the expression. I don't know who said it. My father brought us up saying it. Don't trust anybody with more than you can allow them to take from you. And so when it comes to certain, with institutions, you have to adopt the exact same thing. And when it comes to law enforcement, they have the ability to take everything from you. And so you can't give blind trust, especially once you've seen the historical issues. It's the government and law enforcement today are no different fundamentally than they have ever been in the history of humankind. And to think that the governments of today are somehow more benevolent and trustworthy, you're not learning from history.
What have you seen, Alita?
Yeah. What's that?
What have you seen, Alita? Have you dealt with some of these? I know you should be telling us about the conservatorship going on with Britney Spears. I think you have knowledge in that area.
That's another case that I've sort of been reflecting on a bit this week and thinking about how much trust I have in the system too. Because I think I have a tendency to trust it a little bit, kind of like Nate. But I don't know. I mean, this whole conservatorship case is I mean, obviously it's been a wild ride, but since the last time we all got together a couple of weeks ago, there was another hearing in the Britney Spears case. And she's like, it seems like there's been like a change in the wind in that case because there were like a number of key people that requested to resign. So, one of the co-conservators of her estate, that was a new co-conservator, hadn't started actually doing any work on it, requested to resign. The court approved that. Her court-appointed attorney, who's been representing her since the beginning of the conservatorship, he also requested to withdraw, pending an appointment of another attorney to represent her. And so because of that, she, or maybe, I don't know, maybe they had some sort of discussion ahead of time, but she also requested to have her own attorney of her choosing to represent her. And that is a huge, huge deal, of course, because conservatorships at the center of any conservatorship case is someone's capacity, right? The conservatee has to have, capacity to make certain decisions. And if they don't, then the court decides to put them under a conservatorship. So, decisions like entering into a contract, hiring a lawyer, getting married, all of those things, you need to have requisite capacity. And there can be different levels of capacity that you need for each of those. But in this case, the court actually approved her request to have her own attorney. And it's a big law attorney, Matthew Rosengart. He works for Greenberg Traurig out of LA. That's very reputable, big firm, as I'm sure you guys know. I mean, she was like elated. You can see on her Instagram post that she was like super stoked. But yeah, that's.
I think Eric brought this up. Oh.
I was just gonna say, one thing you can trust is that sunlight is a good disinfectant, and the more something is brought to the view of the people, all of a sudden people become more responsible when they're not acting under the cloak of darkness.
Yeah. I mean, and that's true. Is that
Amen.
Like one of the things that I was thinking about is, in my time working in these kinds of cases, working in trusts and estates and guardianships and conservatorships. Oh, Winston.
All these animals here.
I've got a kitten over here. I should bring her in here.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it's chilling for clicks, Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I feel bad, Alita. I cut you off with the dog.
That's actually why I can't let the puppy in, is because we've got this little injured kitten here that I found last weekend, and we're getting her prepared for eventually to be rehomed somewhere, hopefully. But anyway, I'll when I have a moment, I'll go and get her so I can show you guys. She's super cute. She's like three months old only. But what was I saying? I got distracted by all the animals.
Conservatorship, sunlight, and
Oh,
people
yes.
behaving responsibly.
Yes. So one of the things that I kind of it had been a little bit of time since I was working in California and in this whole system, and one of the things that I remembered is that as a litigator, it's actually kind of a nice area of law to work in because it tends to move a little bit more slowly. I say nice. Sometimes it's actually a little bit frustrating how slowly it works. But whereas other areas of law for as a litigator can be a very grueling pace especially if you have a large caseload that you're constantly trying to push things forward. But in trust and estates, I mean, usually I think mostly because it's there's typically nothing terribly urgent because someone has already usually passed away, and so they are they're just kind of figuring out what to do with that person's money and with all their stuff. So things tend to move a little bit slowly. And I think that sometimes maybe it could very well be that this area of law has gotten a little bit too accustomed to sort of letting things sit the way that they are.
Can I answer this question? If Brittany was legally a child, well, she's not legally a child, unfortunately.
Right.
That's not the way it works. There's a famous case, well, for those of you who've been to law school, from Maryland, in which there was I think a 14-year-old and a 20-year-old, but 20-year-old had the mental capacity of a 14-year-old, and they had relations, and they prosecuted the 20-year-old for the statutory implications of that. I'm trying not to say the word, but
you get enough of those in me earlier.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
true. That has to say it, right? But in that case, it was appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, it was a messed up rule, but the fact and it was actually found that the person was less mentally competent than the 14-year-old, but since the person was technically 20, they could charge and convict the person as an adult, which is sick, but that's just the way the law is.
I think I'm siding more with Conservative Voices University. Rats fleeing a sinking ship. Brittany should sue all of them. Sue them all. You guys would have to advise on whether or not she can sue, but I believe it is more akin to rats fleeing a sinking ship when they see, because even if there were arguments in law, let's just say legitimate arguments in law, what we have seen, to the extent that the allegations are true, is so wildly unpopular that it doesn't matter if they had a legal basis for some of their actions. The moral basis or the logical basis is no longer there, and they're seeing the backlash among the general support. So they want to get the heck out of there, especially conservators, the corporate one, who realizes that they don't have necessarily the support of their conservatee. And everyone's going to want to get the heck out of there when they realize that there's opposition from the individual who doesn't come off as needing full conservatorship at 39 years old, given her capability. So, but she's the one who's texting the conservator saying she wants the conservator to stay on as conservator. Like there's a lot more going on here. Maybe that might just be just one little piece of it. But I don't know. I hate coming to judgments without more information. But again, I agree with you, Viva. Based on what we've heard now, and if this is all true, I'm with you. I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to listen to all of that, all of the evidence that's come out recently, and to say, nope, I think we should keep with the status quo. Don't look into it. Don't re-examine things. Because it's just, I mean, the allegations that she made were just so crazy. Wild.
Yeah.
But as far as the Bessemer Trust Company, apparently they hadn't started any actual work as a co-conservator because they had just been recently appointed. So I don't think that they necessarily have any real liability to worry about because they only just got involved. They didn't actually make any decisions. But so I think that they're your Jason mask. Oh no. But I think that their decision to withdraw probably has much more of much more to do with them trying to avoid future liability, because they probably see how things are heating up in this case and they're like, nope, I don't want to deal with this. There's going to be litigation. There's going to be crazy litigation in the future. So get me out of here.
You know, for those of you who keep saying that's true. Well, you know what, Eric?
That was my big gripe.
Eric, one thing that you said earlier, I think last week or was the week before last, which was interesting, is that you said, well, if she has the ability to hire her own lawyer, why wouldn't she have the ability to take care of herself? You said something like in that realm. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And now she has the ability to hire her own lawyer. So it's kind of like, well, what that means she has the ability to take care of herself. You know what I mean?
She can drive now too, I think. Wasn't that something they said, that she can drive?
Yeah. She's allowed to drive now. Yeah. And it's, I mean, but like I said, you know, when we're talking about capacity, there are various levels of capacity that are required for different decisions, you know? So I remember reading case law that, that's funny. I remember reading case law that, that said, that, the capacity required for getting married, for example, is actually kind of shockingly low, especially in comparison to entering into a contract or, executing a trust, which to me,
it's crazy.
It's crazy because that affects so much in your life. Like that affects so much of your financial life, really. Like so many aspects of your life are impacted by the person that you choose to marry.
That actually is a sidetrack, but I used to be like, so against arranges that, what a hateful, terrible thing. And over time, I've kind of stepped away from it going, yeah, usually the first thing that dies in a relationship is romance. And the arranged marriages, there's an argument to be made that they actually discover each other and learn to love over time versus the reverse. And I shouldn't go against other cultures.
You know what? One thing I think most people may not appreciate here in New York State. 2 days ago, the governor just signed legislation that made it you had to be 18 years or older to enter into a marriage. Before that, the age of consent to enter into a marriage was 14. So just imagine you could get married at 14. Now you would have your parents' permission and you can go to a court and say, hey, we want to get married. But there were people here in the state of New York married at 14 years old. That's ridiculous, And
then, I mean, because somebody actually, I forgot where it was, but they were arguing about that is Thaddeus Russell. Thaddeus Russell is always good for taking a contrarian view on things that you wouldn't think of. And he's right. The argument is in the 1800s and early 20th century, lifespan wasn't and getting married at 14 was realistic because you could only have kids for so long. So it's a factor of how long you live. So slipping up to 18 is really just math on we're living longer than we used to. And
but life expectancy changed back in the with the advent of penicillin. You know what I'm saying? It's been this way for about 80 years. We've been living longer. So I think in 2020 it's hard to justify 14.
It's also cultural too, because in rural fill in the blank, when you have the kids who had to work the farm, it didn't stop that long ago. They're still in different cultures, different countries in the world. It's very hard for me to sit there and say, no, you're absolutely wrong. Here, culturally speaking, it doesn't make any sense. It's inefficient.
My answer is limited to United States, to New York specifically. But I think in other places you're going to have different rules. Yeah.
Well, but it also, first of all, the mortality argument is one thing. Say we're living longer, okay, but if we're maturing earlier, I mean, presumably it's not just mortality but maturity. But the issue is 14-year-old getting married. That has to be merged and what is the word? It has to operate with other existing laws of consent. So a 14-year-old can get married. There's only a certain, I think, 2 to 4 year age group to which this person can get married. But I think it is the idea that by having a 14-year-old marriage limit, you're effectively saying 14-year-old consent limit, within that certain range. And that's why I think people take issue with young marriages, not necessarily arranged marriages.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a hard one. I mean, I understand it. And, my impulse is to say that nobody should be married till they're 26. They should follow auto insurance levels because they know they're smart enough with actuarial tables to say, oh, hell no, you're not getting a discount till you're 26 because you're too damn immature. that might be a good idea too.
Or have to take a course to know what to expect when you get married, and just a course to sensitize you to the fact that
and you paid attention to your courses.
But let's not forget though, we're talking about somebody making a major decision. They can't drive, they can't vote, they can't have a drink, they can't do anything, right? Anything they can't even enter into a contract, right? Any other contract. And we're saying that they can get married. I don't know. Maybe you're right. I think in the context of American law and where we're at, I think it's different than when you're talking about, if we're in some middle, some Asian country or something like that, where life expectancy is different and the culture is different. But here, I don't see really a good justification for marrying people at 14. It's just, at this point in time, it's hard. It'll be hard to convince me in a Western society that that's okay. They
could just call it something different, like going steady, and then you can go steady until you're 18, and then it turns into marriage if you want to.
And here, it's not limited to 14-year-olds, right? If a 30-year-old wants to get married to a 14-year-old, it was possible until they changed the law. So,
well, I'm weird too. I think that marriage itself should be gone. That it should be all civil unions, and then you can go marry in a church. But what we're talking about is a contract between two people.
Well, what would be the functional difference, though?
Yeah, it's essentially the same thing.
The term marriage is actually kind of a religious connotation. I think that a civil union, I feel like you should have two things. You should have what you do for the government, and then what you do for your church, or your people, or your kind, or whatever. And that would have solved the whole gay marriage question a long time ago.
But technically, all marriages are civil unions.
Right. Yeah. So get rid of the term and just make it a civil union, and then you can get married in a church and have.
But don't forget that was the argument.
I like the efficiency of the word marriage as opposed to civil union. I mean, because it seems like that's really the difference in the word that you use.
You still can get married, but you're enforcing the civil union aspect of it. And I know that Joe's in the chat, and I believe in Orthodox Jewish, I could be stepping way out there, but I think that they actually do have a contract with their church in addition to the laws, and what they agree to with the religion is as important to them, if not more, than
there's a religious contract that gave birth to those lawsuits where the husband the husband is the only one who's in a position to grant the religious divorce to the wife. It's called a get, and so they can be civilly divorced, but if the husband has not granted the religious divorce, technically they're still married under Jewish law, which means that the woman cannot remarry, cannot have children, otherwise there'll be children out of wedlock. And so some particularly spiteful husbands refused to give the get. And so there was a case that made it to court, it made it to the Supreme Court, and I forget the exact details because I think he undertook civilly to grant the get, then refused to respect his civil undertaking to grant the religious divorce, and the court sanctioned it. So, but no, it comes up. It's definitely two different contracts, and I think it's the same in other religions as well. But you have the government stuff, and then you have the religious stuff, and sometimes they clash.
Interesting. That's an interesting nuance there. I hadn't heard about that.
Well,
most people forget.
Most people don't know, like for marriage law here in the States. Let's say if me and a woman go, well, now me and my wife, but if we go get a marriage license, and we actually don't we're not technically married, even though if we have a marriage license. But if we don't get a marriage license and go through the ceremony, then we are technically married. It's a weird thing where the license doesn't dictate whether you get married or not, but actually going through the ceremony. So it's weird, but
common law too.
Some states have common law marriages, and some states
not every state has it. Yeah, California doesn't have a common law marriage, for example.
But do they have common law recognition of rights or no?
I don't think so. No.
You're kidding. One would think they should. Okay, that's weird.
To be confirmed.
Well, because I know there were a lot of cases where like some people would move to like a state that someone moved with their girlfriend to like a state like Virginia. I'm making this up because I'm not sure the Virginia still has common law. And you would stay with them for like a week, and in Virginia you'd be common law because you're living as or holding yourselves out, and then you go back to your home state, and if people want to get divorced and like, oh, I was married, we were married common law in Virginia. That means we're also married in New York. So it happens a lot.
I wonder if California's like that.
It was because wasn't how gay marriage ultimately got through, was the fact that you could be legally married in one state and not recognized in another state, and that caused the confusion with the Commerce Clause? Or how did that work?
With full faith and credit.
Okay.
It was a little commerce
Yeah.
and a little full faith and credit. Where if you get a license, that's why how your license is good in one state and all states. You got to give full faith and credit to the judicial determinations of another state. So if they've determined that this person's married, then but that's where the Defensive Marriage Act came in, because the Defensive Marriage Act said that we don't that states didn't have to follow that particular thing and give the exemption. The exemption was for, I forget what it was called, but there was an exemption that they allowed the state to opt out.
Get the cat. People want the kitten. Okay, well, I was wondering on that, because I would think that the common law argument could follow the same path, right?
Well, but again, there are a lot of cases with common law, because if you're married in one state, you're married, in more or less all states, and you can't go get married again. And the case law is so filled with them.
Oh my goodness! First of all, your camera quality. Nate, you've been outdone by a kitten here.
Yeah, you're done.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about deep marriage law stuff, so don't worry about it. The kitten is,
that cat looks like every cat from a toilet paper commercial I've ever seen. I'm just kidding. Oh, by the way, if anybody doesn't know, Daniel Thrasher may not want me referencing his channel. This guy, Daniel Thrasher, he does like comedy skits on YouTube, oftentimes involving pianos, but he had the funniest one on earth where if you do Daniel Thrasher cat something, compose a song, and it's a song sung by a cat that has a human mouth, and it's hilarious.
Aww.
So now I can't even look at kittens anymore without seeing Daniel Thrasher.
Aww.
Nate, Nate, your camera's going in and out, by the way.
No, I'm just turning on my AC. That's why.
Okay.
So.
He's just trying to find a small animal that he can also bring into this chat.
Nate, you guys are following this. The January 6th prosecutions now. We've seen one guy get sentenced to 8 months in jail, and a number of the other arrested individuals are still being detained. Oh, there you go. Okay. But this might get you into trouble, Eric, because if it's copyrighted material, if you play it, they might claim this video.
All right, you know what? I'm not going to worry.
So don't take any chances.
Just put the link in the chat or something so that
when your cat writes a song, by the way, it's hilarious, and his stuff is hilarious, and it's totally non-political. I get in trouble sometimes for commenting on his videos when my comment goes to the top, and I was like, "Hey, you're that crazy lawyer guy. Don't bring your stuff here." But
you're kidding.
Well, okay, it happened once or twice, but it's traumatizing whenever it happens. I'm a human too. I like to laugh. Yeah. So what's going on? What's going on now?
Wait. I thought lawyers only laughed when you were counting money.
I was a bad lawyer then, because Rakeda just put out a video talking about the biometrics.
I wanted to go into that.
Yeah. I want to hear what the American lawyers have to say, because Nick's trusted as well. But I always thought that your biometrics could not be used to unlock a phone or something under the Fifth Amendment. But I didn't realize that that's state by state and not universal throughout the United States.
Let me jump in so I can be wrong and everybody can correct me. Seriously, because I'm not the knowledgeable one. From what I understand, they can use a biometric the same way they take a fingerprint, because that's non-invasive and they're not taking anything. So holding your fingerprint on that is not you testifying to anything. However, they cannot force you to give them your password, because now they're invading your mind. That's something internal, and they can't use DNA as a biometric, because that's also pulling something out of you. But if you have your eyes open and they wave in front of your face and it's enough to do that, or facial recognition, that's your fault for doing the biometrics. Add a second password, and then they have to get a search warrant to go further. I think Dr. Wood was talking about it too. Depending also on what they're retrieving, they need to have a warrant to go beyond what they're specifically. Like if you're being busted for drugs, looking in your address book for the other drug dealers or something is within scope, but checking out friends' photos of your girlfriend, not necessarily.
No. Well, I've done many of these. No, it's the Supreme Court. I remember when the Supreme Court came out with this decision. Justice Roberts authored the opinion for cell phones. I'm not sure about the whole biometrics piece, but for cell phones, if the government wants to search your cell phone, they need a warrant. Even if they wave it in front of your face and open it up, they still, that evidence that they get, if they don't have a warrant or an exception to the warrant requirement, they cannot use that evidence against you at all. That it's a constitutional violation, and Justice Roberts made that very clear in his opinion. So and anything electronic based too. So for instance, I had a case when I was at the Brooklyn DA. I did the first case, their drone case, where there was a drone that was flying, and then they arrested the guy with the drone, and then we had to do a warrant to get into the drone and get all that information and stuff. And even though he gave us the passwords and everything, we still couldn't use it until we got the warrant. So,
what about PIN registers? From my understanding, that's perfectly viable. That you can pull all records of the phone dialing in and out and whatever else, and tracking.
I think there's certain things, maybe pen registers or something like that. But I'm talking about if the cops arrest somebody and take their phone and put their phone to the face to open it up and get information on it, that's a violation of the Constitution. That they're violating the warrant requirement, and that evidence is subject to be thrown out. I've seen it happen before.
And I found 2 tricks for anybody who's interested. If you have droplets of water on your glasses, if your phone recognizes your face with glasses, it won't recognize it with the droplets. And if you get arrested and you don't want them opening your phone by putting it to your face, take your glasses off and smash them, because it won't recognize you without your glasses. Not legal advice.
If your eyes are closed, it won't work. On an iPhone, if your eyes are closed, it won't open.
Yeah, or if you get the facial recognition only to recognize an absolutely absurd face, like something like this, when you ask it to confirm, then you have to make that face every time you unlock your phone. Well, I think I'm going to do that. That would be funny. That way, whenever you unlock your phone, you do this, and everyone's going to wonder what the heck you're doing if you're having.
It'd be funny though, because I think of the old wives' tale. If you keep doing that expression, your face will freeze that way.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So there apparently, but Nate, apparently one of the decisions came out that said that they could use. I don't know if they used a fingerprint or facial recognition to access the phone, but I believe they were accessing the phone. Am I wrong about that? I don't have the details.
I'm not sure what the details. Well, I'm not sure what the details are, but the way you get in is almost irrelevant. The fact that if those governments to search your phone, then they would need either to fall in one of the exceptions for the warrant requirement, or have a warrant themselves to get into the phone. So
here's the question too, Nate. Okay, you have a search warrant, and I don't give you my password.
Yeah, then you can put it on your face. You can do whatever. Like it happened with the shooters in California when they remember Apple wouldn't break the phone, so they got another company to break into the phone.
And I think that maybe that's where we're going with it, is the whole thing of you can't compel me to give you my password, whether or not you have a search warrant. You can
yeah, definitely.
But holding my finger to it, you can do, right?
Yeah, even that, like, to be honest with you, I would think that's a little stretch. Like, say, forcing, like, taking your foot, that might be a little something too.
Well,
I don't know.
Anyway, right?
Yeah, because it seems like it's ultimately the same thing as. I mean, all of these these are all equivalents of using your password, right, or your passcode in order to get into your phone. So it seems like whatever strategy they take or whatever method they take that replaces that, it should be the same standard across the board, whether it's a fingerprint or a face, like using your face to unlock it. It just, that's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, I know, these are interesting questions. And I would just recommend that people, if you don't want your stuff searched, if you use biometrics, it can be more easily done.
Yeah.
If you have password and stuff, I mean, even Apple, I credit Apple for their stance, actually. And they've gotten even stronger since that happened.
Yeah, I remember.
I don't know.
They find exceptions. They find exceptions.
Yeah, because don't forget, these people just killed like 20 people. They just had a shootout with the cops. Like, we're not going to crack their phones. That's like, come on, really? Like, there's no absolutes.
If you built a tool to crack the phone, then now every phone is cracked. It's leaked. I work in tech, dude. So I know why it's there. And don't give me the slippery slope fallacy. We've already done the fallacy argument from last time.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
But the truth is that you cannot, if you build a back door, you have built a back door, and that's it. So the FBI's had to hire the Israelis, and the FBI's, no offense, and I'm sure David might agree now, full of shit, because they have plenty of other evidence, plenty to go through. And I'm a little tired of always hearing that we need to have you give up more rights because we just can't figure things out. We ignore when people are, trying to or refusing to land planes, and all this evidence is already turned in. But wait, it's not all the stuff we already have that would tell you it's your private thing. So we need to take away a little more of your privacy.
I mean, I don't necessarily blame them for trying to go, like when you're the attorney representing anyone in that case, you're going to try to get as much information as you possibly can get your hands on, like even if we put this outside of the context of an FBI case, I don't necessarily blame them for making the argument and trying to make the push for it. But I mean, I remember, we were talking about the back door of cell phones. I remember I think it was the San Bernardino shooter case.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, that Apple was refusing to unlock it for them, and I agreed. I agreed with them for that, because I mean there's not necessarily a good reason for it, that doesn't violate someone's civil rights.
I don't know, when you murder like a whole bunch of people and you have a shootout with the cops,
civil rights are still civil rights.
Yeah, but you can lose your right to be alive, right? You due process of law. You can lose your right. You lose your rights all the time when you do certain things. So I'm not saying I don't believe searching a cell phone after someone who's murdered all these people is a violation, especially when you have a warrant to do so, right? We have a political process, and the warrant is, and you hold on. Let me just finish. We've gone through the process, right? We have due process. You get a warrant. The warrant says you can search this cell phone, and you say, "Hey, Apple, can you break this phone open?" And Apple says no. I agree. Apple shouldn't be compelled to break open the phone. Right. That's fine, but I don't think that's I wouldn't say I agree with Apple by saying no, especially that these people just murdered all these people. I would think they would say. Now, I think the argument Eric made before about opening a back door, and they may have, that's fine. I understand you don't want to have a back door, but I don't think that was Apple's argument. They were like, we're not going to open up phones for anybody.
They said we cannot get into it ourselves without reverse engineering it or putting a hole into the operating system.
And that's fine.
Not hacking our stuff.
And that's good.
I have a question for you on this.
That's good. That's all right. I agree with that then.
Here's another one that Golden State Killer, right?
Okay.
How was he found? He was found
DNA, right?
Oh, because of the ancestry.com or something.
Yeah,
right?
DNA. Yeah.
Cousin donated DNA.
Yeah.
This is a similar, to me, it's similar. It's not exactly the same, but you have somebody who's a horrible serial killer. All agree. You have DNA that is on the crime scene. All agree. You have people who turn in their DNA for whatever the reason might be. It could be health, it could be otherwise, but they say anonymous. I wish to be anonymous. Should their DNA, and there's actually a case out of South Carolina that I believe is covering this, should their DNA be used to identify them, they've committed no crime or anything else, because you want to find out who their second cousin was?
No, absolutely not. No, that should not happen.
I think it's similar here, because there's a certain right to privacy of my phone and every other phone that Apple's not going to build a hacking tool or a backdoor, because now they're making all of our stuff vulnerable to. You need to go to a hacker, go to the Israelis. They managed to hack it. Fine. That, you win, you got in. But I think Apple is correct on it. And I don't think it's dissimilar to I don't wish to reveal who I am. I'm sorry that something horrible happened, but I do have rights to my privacy if I've done nothing with my DNA.
Well, it's the Fifth Amendment, the right to not self-incriminate. I guess the idea is it just a question of the methods of cracking into the potentially incriminating information? If it's on a cell phone and it requires a person's face, it requires a person's brain power for the password, it's one thing. If it's in their house and it requires a locksmith to break down the door because the individual doesn't want to give the passcode to the back door entrance, it's a separate thing. It's the act of the individual who is incriminating themselves versus finding another person after a warrant has been issued and respecting those rights to incriminate the person for them. And so, the locksmith picking the lock is different than forcing the individual to put in the passcode, if only from the Fifth Amendment perspective. I agree with you. Taking the most egregious examples to try to set the rule is the bad way to establish the rule. And as far as it goes, once you're already at that point, it's arguable whether or not there was anything on their phone that would have further convicted them. There, it's a question of finding out who else could have been involved, but presumably, or fortifying the evidence in the actual sense of the word.
Well, I think you're right. I think Viva's made the point. There are two arguments going on here. Apple making a backdoor, that argument I agree with, right? They shouldn't have to break their phone and open the back door and have that problem. That's fine. Yeah. But the fact that this phone they had a legal warrant to go into this phone to get information, and asking Apple, I don't think was improper. And Apple saying we don't want to do it for this reason, I think was good. But I just want to make sure we all agree. Maybe we don't. Is that
they did say
they
we
should
do not have that. We don't have that mechanism.
But I'm saying I don't think anyone has a problem with the government going into that phone, getting that evidence in that situation, right? Because that is one of the exceptions to the rule.
It depends on how they get it, though. That is the question.
Right.
Do they get it by torturing the password out of the guy, by using his face against his will?
No. I'm saying the way I'm not using an analogy. I'm saying for the facts that we have that happened. Apple says no. I believe Apple should have done it if they could have, but based on everything Eric said they couldn't do it. There was good reasons why. Okay, fine. Apple's off the hook. But then they hired hackers and hacked into it. And I think that was an appropriate response by the government to execute a lawful warrant to get into, just like if it was a locksmith or it was a safe, they would hire someone to break into the lock. They hired someone to break into the phone. I think that was an appropriate use of government resources based on having a duly executed warrant and giving these killers due process. No?
Yeah, no, we agree.
Okay, so I think that was the only thing I was saying. I was confused whether we were agreeing with that piece of it, but how they broke in, I agree with you guys on that piece of it with the Apple.
Right, they want Apple to create keys. They made it very clear because they were using this as a spearhead case that they wanted Apple to create a back door for them because look, you're letting people die, you're letting drug dealers do stuff.
Yeah.
Law enforcement has the right to get into the stuff. That is the whole angle of it. And I'm saying that that's the camel's nose in the tent. I know what you're doing. No. Hell no.
I've never heard that expression before, but I immediately had the visual, and it's a good visual.
Does it pass your analogy requirements? I know you hate analogy.
That's more of a metaphor, I would say.
Okay.
The only issue that, if there's any disagreement, is hire hackers to execute a lawful warrant is like hiring a locksmith to evict a tenant.
That's fair.
Not using the individual
session and whatever. That's, by the way, that same argument I would stand up with and say, I bought my phone. I have a right to repair my phone. I have a right to jailbreak my phone. And that actually was a case that went through.
Right.
So if the FBI, through their warrant or whatever, has seized the phone, they technically have to own this, or they have to have it as property. You can do what you want with your property. And if they've gotten, to the degree where they have seized this property, well, do it. It's your property. Do what you're going to do. I don't care. Well, don't tell GM to build me something special to get in the car. You can hire somebody to do it, but it's not GM's job to let you in the car or to remodel the car so you have an extra, universal key or whatever for everybody to use.
No. That I agree with. I agree with that 100%. But again, we're talking about the rights of private citizens and private corporations versus government compulsion. So I understand it, and I agree. And I agree with that particular point. But now, if we start talking about Facebook and YouTube and all this other stuff, the conversation switches. So I'm not going to go there.
Pull up 305 3.0 face or fingerprint.
No, only thing I was saying is that the freedom, because essentially that's the argument, and that's the argument on both sides, is that the freedom of these companies to say I'm not going to do this for the government, and I agree with you. They shouldn't have the ability to say I'm going to do this for the government. And the same argument is for Facebook now. Facebook is saying we are not going to remove certain posts for the government. And the government's saying we want you to remove that post, and I think we all agree Facebook shouldn't be compelled to remove those posts. Right. If they do, as Viva said in his video, if they do remove those posts based on the government, then they are essentially like government actions. Exactly. That's Viva's argument, which I agree with.
To agree with Facebook for 10 minutes because they've been wrong on it.
I hate to use this word. Facebook's statement now seems a lot like what we would refer to in the industry as controlled opposition, or methinks they doth protest it. So it's like, oh crap, we've been caught with our hands in the cookie jar. Better create some separation between us and the government right now. Let's protest a little bit too disingenuously hard.
Yeah, like letters, you mean? Is that what we're talking about?
Say it again.
Fauci letters with Zuck?
Oh no, it's like we've been caught in bed with Fauci. We've been caught with Jen Psaki saying we're working with them, flagging for them. Now we've got to make sure people don't think we're working with them. Now let's just protest. Right. It smells fishy to me. But go to Theophrastus 3.0. It says face or fingerprint against his will. That's like taking the car keys. Once there's a warrant, face and fingerprint are okay. That's the issue. Face and fingerprint for incarceration, maybe, but not for incrimination, because the issue is the fundamental one. Are you using their face to self-incriminate them? Now, I see the argument where if you do facial recognition on, in public spaces or on video, you're using their face to incriminate them. But it's a different type of self-incrimination where you're saying, I want your fingerprint to get evidence from you to use against you, as opposed to just, booking you. But
well, hold on. I have a question for you. When I'm booked for a crime, and there are fingerprints that are left at the crime scene, I don't want to give up my fingerprints when I'm booked, but I have to. And that's perfectly legal because of identification. Well, now you can use that same fingerprint, I believe, completely legally, right, Nate?
In other cases.
And compare that to the crime scene. That's
Right.
where I was saying the argument would be whether it was something that you leave behind and whether it was intrusive or not. And a fingerprint is outside of you. It's not getting into your body, into your mind, into your heart. So
Nate's on mute. I don't think he knows.
No. I know. I'm saying I'm saying to myself, Eric is right, because he's right. Because, for instance, if there's DNA at the crime scene, I can't punch you in the face and take your, stab you and get blood from you. I have to then get a warrant to it, because that's a physical intrusion inside your body. So Eric, Eric is 100% right. The non-lawyer is right on the legal topic. I hate you, Eric. You're killing us.
I gotta tell you, this was the best piece of merch I ever got for the law firm. It's a business card that pops into a USB.
Nice. Oh, nice.
When you stick it into a computer,
copy too, which is cool.
Yeah. Anyways, it looks cool, and it could be used as a weapon if you really want to flick it and hit someone. But that's what I
love that. That's actually really cool.
Yeah, it was. I think they were $7 each. Biggest expense for merch, and I still have one left over.
That's pretty nifty.
Nice. And you look at it, you're like, Jesus, I can't even hold a Word document on that anymore.
Yeah, it is. It's under 1 gig. I think it's 512 megs.
Oh my God.
But I want to go back to Facebook though, because that's a really interesting point that they sort of put their distance between that they're putting their distance between them and the government now, because it seems like that seems to be a relatively common strategy that Facebook seems to take. Because I remember for the hearings on Section 230 and on antitrust law, it was Zuckerberg that was actually saying, like, well, actually, maybe we should have some amendment, to say that, that there should be some, I guess, like, due process controls or something like that. When everyone else was like, nope, there shouldn't be a change to the law at all, nothing at all. That's interesting that they seem to be sort of taking that strategy also in this respect. It's very.
I feel like Jen did everybody a favor by overstepping. It's like, thank you. You're not hiding the ball now. You're literally saying what everybody's been accusing you of. The whole
bit the quiet part out loud.
If you're kicked off one channel, you should be kicked off all channels. It's like, okay, well, now you just said it. Thank you.
I'm going to say this is, notice the pattern, and it's the Times article on the election fortification. They come out and they say it loud to normalize what was done. BuzzFeed on the, what are they called? The Watchmen, the Wolverine Watchmen. They come out and say it out loud. It's unclear as to whether or not there would have even been a conspiracy in the first place, but for the 12 plus FBI informants. But they say it out loud, and then they go on to break it down as though to sensitize you to this is the way it's going to be going forward. Psaki comes out, and she comes out and she says, first, we flag 4. Second, we tell them that you should be banned across all, and they just normalize it now. Now the government's saying it, and now people are going to say, well, that's just the way it is. And I've seen the way people did that, in particular with the 2020 event. And it's a human social conditioning thing. And it's 3 perfect examples of how they've taken the issue and normalized it through the public ownership of it.
See, the banning from all
and the italics. How do you do that? No, I'm like this. I'm like, yes, everybody hit like, but also, how do you do italics?
There's a matter of fact, I'll send you the link. You can do it on but you're probably gonna go crazy. You can do it on Twitter too, which I'd like to do a lot now.
Yep.
There's a program you can do. I'll send you the link. But one thing though, I do think the most troubling, like the 4 flagging posts, I'm not as convinced with, but I am convinced that the advocating of getting everyone off of all social media, I think that's the dangerous piece of it, because I don't think the government, that censorship is going way too far, right? Just because I did something bad on Facebook means I can't use it. Essentially, I can't use a computer for anything. I think That's the thing that's I think most troubling, and I think that's the thing that we should definitely be outraged about, because just because I if I do a bad face on Facebook, that doesn't mean I should be kicked off of YouTube. That's ridiculous.
Well, now they're turning it into the public square officially by saying everybody should be kicked off. That is kind of forcing it out there. Like, nope, this is in the public sphere now. You can't go to somewhere else.
That's a very legally tenuous. I'm talking about that. That's just it's going to be legally like almost impossible to make that argument. I understand where you're going, but it's just not
no, I think I'm tracking what Nate is saying. I think that the public square argument is it's still limited to the digital world, right? But I think that what it starts to look like is people are these various big companies acting together, which may have antitrust implications.
That's the piece of it you got to worry about, them acting together. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. If Facebook bans you, they're a private company, they can do whatever. But if I'm colluding with all of the companies to ban you from everywhere, now we're talking about a different story.
Yeah.
All right, I guess Joe took a nap and he wants to comment about something we were talking about 20 minutes ago.
But I do want to ask you something about something, because someone brought up a very interesting take to this: the banning to all for all social media, casinos, the black book. If you do something, if you're found cheating in one casino, they put you in a black book and you're banned from all casinos. They're private companies. Why wouldn't that be analogous to the Facebook issue? Now, I didn't know how to respond to the person, but I felt it was different because you don't have a right to gamble, but you do have a right to association. So they were saying that it's the same argument that Facebook could make, is that, hey, just like the casinos are allowed to ban you nationwide, right? If I got banned in the casino in Atlantic City, I'll be banned in the same one in Las Vegas too. It's a nationwide ban if you put in the black book. Why couldn't that be the same for private companies?
I don't know. Can you ban somebody from a hotel chain?
You can ban somebody from the casinos, though. But the casinos, I know for a fact. I'm not sure about the.
But I wanted to go further on it, because casinos is an activity.
Yeah.
But I was just going to step back one and say, can you ban somebody from all Starbucks, or can you ban somebody from another kind of business that's not? And I'm genuinely asking. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that would be so hard to. That would be just so hard to implement, by banning someone from every single Starbucks in the world. There's so many. What would you do? Like, put somebody's photo up on the wall, like, wanted. This person is not allowed in here.
Okay, well, and I guess it goes to the public square question. And yes, STFU. And that's what I think the whole argument is, whether the social media companies are the public square or not. If they are not, I understand people arguing that. I think we're getting closer and closer and closer, because there is a point where you cannot survive without being able to get your word out there, like get your employment, your work, your different things like that, to where it's a serious deleterious effect on you.
Don S just brought up no-fly list.
Yeah, which I think is wrong.
You again, it seems like, and I think this may be a little gray area than I don't like it. I don't like the fact that this whole ban from all, I do not like it. I think it's wrong. I'm just against it. But there are some instances where I think an argument can be made that it could pass some legal muster. No-fly list, the black book, and all these other things.
That one should be challenged. The no-fly list should be challenged.
Oh, yeah. I hate the no-fly list. Go ahead, Viva. I'm sorry.
The banning from the casinos, is it a formal policy, or is it just an unwritten one, and good luck challenging it? Because I don't know that it would be a formal policy of terms of service of all of them combined together. But they there was a black book. Well, you can even see it the movie 21. There was a black book where if you find cheating in one casino and you've made money, they put you in a book and they ban you from all casinos. So if you're found in a casino, they kick you out. Yes, and the no-fly list is another example of that. Well, no, say the no-fly list seems more regulated and more publicly spoken one. The black book just means that it's under the table type thing, and they're operating together.
Correct.
But if there's going to be an argument, set aside the town square, I would say the commonality of the activity is going to be what could possibly justify banning from casinos, but not banning across all social media, because casinos are there for one specific activity, gambling, and so a competition ban for people who've used performance-enhancing drugs can apply to any competition because it's activity specific. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, they're not activity specific or even identical. So there's no logical correlation to banning one person across all platforms when there's no common activity that could have justified the sanction in the first place. That would be my logical argument.
What's CP?
Yes.
Well,
but
crimes are banned, period.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but if you put CP on one, then they can say, well, we're not just so we're not gonna let you go on any other. I'm not saying the argument's coherent. I'm just saying I like to think about how things can be challenged, and I've taken one position. I agree with you guys on the position, but I'm saying I'm trying to see what the counter argument would be on the other side, and I think there are some viable counter arguments that we'd have to discuss. I do like your response, though, Viva. I think your response is well reasoned, but I just think that it would have to be tested in court for it to be settled. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and so people are saying, the CP is already illegal. I'm trying, and so is
of course,
so is doping, so is cheating.
Yeah.
Whereas card counting is not illegal.
It's not illegal, but you'll still be banned. Yeah, card count, and so is being on a no-fly list. If my name is Osama bin Laden, I can't fly because they'll put my name on the no-fly list. There are people on the no-fly list, people who have done no crime, right? But their name was and they're on the no-fly list because they're associated. Either. Yeah, and they're on the no-fly list because they may have called somebody or they may have been associated with somebody who's suspected to be a terrorist. So you don't have to commit any crime to be on the no-fly list. Just so everybody understands that.
Okay, here's another one. It's a good question. I don't know. In terms of a common carrier, do you label yourself as such, or does the government label you? UPS is a common carrier, but FedEx is not. I don't know. And can UPS refuse my packages and another one can't? Or I don't know. These are all really cool questions.
Common carrier is not a designation; it's like a legal status, right? You don't apply for common carrier status and get a certification. It's a legal criteria as to when you meet that threshold.
Like a bridge.
Yeah,
you got a bridge going somewhere that everybody uses that bridge.
Then you can't stop it.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
There's a speaking of the Facebook, there's another lawsuit that Robert sent me that we're going to talk about Sunday, and I didn't read it yet, but it's another one alleging state actor conduct on Facebook censorship. So I'm going to see it.
Is it also by Donald Trump or is it by someone else?
No. Let me see. I'll get it as we talk, but only a question of whether or not it's going to be worth a standalone vlog, because we've been talking about them so much these days.
But I do want to mention this. Nick's argument, though, I think is the most legally viable argument for this whole Facebook issue. And his argument is that the government itself, he removes Facebook from the equation and just says the government, by flagging posts, that government action is just like back in the 50s and 60s when the government was investigating communists, and they would say, we're investigating communists. And the Supreme Court said, well, that investigation has a chilling effect on free speech, because you're telling people we're going to investigate you if you have this communist stuff, then you're not going, then it chills free speech. And they said that was unconstitutional, then investigating that free speech. And I think Nick's argument in saying flagging posts that the government doesn't like, that also could have a chilling effect because the government is flagging it. So I think that argument's more viable than trying to figure if Facebook is a state actor or not, because it removes Facebook and says this government action has a chilling effect on free speech.
But in comparing that to McCarthyism, what was the actual act that was, or the thing that was being flagged in that Supreme Court case?
It was like communists. It was anybody who signed up to be like a part of this communist group or something like that. From what I'm understanding, I could be wrong, but I know your association with this group, and if you're getting stuff from it, then they would investigate you and they'd follow you around and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then let everybody know that if you got this material, we were going to investigate you. So I think, and that's where you're referring
to the House on Un-American Activities Commission or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's, but the only thing is that's more than just the government flagging for someone else to investigate, right? Because McCarthyism had to do with the actual, like, the government was actually sending people and following them around and actively investigating them. Whereas here, I agree. I think that's a really good metaphor and a very good argument for this case for Facebook. But I think that there is possibly a distinction there because of the fact that the investigating is being done by the other company and not by the government. The most that the government is doing is flagging it and saying, or at least that we know of anyway, right? There could be more to it than has been publicly made available.
That's true too. Yeah.
If I go out on a limb and make a prediction that I have no basis other than my own thoughts. Mm-hmm. When she said flagging for, I suspect it sounded to me, I believe that they would have a back channel and they can actually remove it themselves without even going through Facebook. And if it has to go through Facebook, it is the most anodyne sort of going through Facebook to have it removed. To me, it sounded like overt control, back channel stuff, like we've seen from the allegations of Twitter coming out of California, and that's what I suspect we would find if it ever got to discovery. But I have no reason for knowing that.
No, but if that's true, then you blew up the whole argument, because then that's obvious government action and that's obvious government censorship. So you wouldn't have an issue with that. So
yeah, no,
hopefully we'll get to that point. We can find out if that's true or not.
That would be amazing. Well, I mean, they already have some preferential things going on. I mean, like, go ahead and leave some comments on Biden YouTube. Now, it's a different company, but same principle.
Well, have they started hiding
disappear, likes, whatever?
Everything's good. No, but he.
Wait, what's?
Oh, yeah.
We all can turn off. I mean, technically speaking, it's like I don't want to hear from them.
Yeah,
and so,
I think I'm a little bit behind on this.
Right.
What exactly happened
on Biden's YouTube channel? All right, do you remember how when Trump tried to ban people on Facebook?
Oh,
how the government came back and said, "Well, you can't ban everybody." So what Biden did was on YouTube, he just turned off comments. So he's not censoring any comments. All comments are banned, which is technically okay.
As of now, it looks like there's comments. I can't even read the first one because it's against YouTube's. No, it looks like there are comments on Joe Biden. It is called Joe Biden, 715,000 followers, subscribers on YouTube, and it seems that there's thumbs up and thumbs down and comments enabled. So.
Wow.
I'm going to go read some of those comments because I guarantee some of them are going to be pure gold.
Yeah, but if any of those, but none of those comments should be hidden or anything. They should all be live comments because your government's not allowed to censor. But YouTube can censor on their behalf, though, which is.
I guess we had a hiccup. That's weird. I'm seeing all the Fs, and people are commenting that there was a stream hiccup. Very weird.
Oh. Well, listen, I have to go because I got to finish my video with Alita before I pick up my kids. So it should be coming out today. U.S. soccer. It's gonna be a good one. It's gonna be a good one. It's funny because I got so many messages about this videos. People are killing me, but it's gonna be here soon. So.
All right. Well, we were gonna be wrapping up anyway.
Okay, cool. We got 5 minutes. I got 5 minutes.
Running. And,
I should say, Nate, not Nate. Good Logic. Joe Neerman in the comments said I should cover more Canadian stuff. I'm still going to cover Canadian stuff, but I created a second channel, which is only going to be documenting the journey of running for Parliament, and it's going to have exclusive stuff on it. It's called Viva PPC on YouTube.
Viva PPC
or English?
Oh no, it'll be in English. I'll if I put some stuff up from French from time to time, but it'll mostly be just episodic. Subject matter, but I got to cover some good Canadian stuff for the main vlog channel, which is not political. It is just news, law.
Awesome. Well, everybody, I hope you like it. So I can bring these people back. Please hit the like. Please consider subscribing. I'm begging you. Oh, and visit everybody's locals. VivaBarnesLaw.locals.com. NateTheLawyer.locals.com.
And I've got to set it up. I have the page open up for locals.com right now, and I've I've got to go and set it up. I keep hearing from people that I need to do that.
Seriously, everybody, you don't have to pay to subscribe, to follow. And more and more channels are getting yanked all the time. And I've had mine completely deleted. I know others. So at least if you're following me on locals, I can say, hey, my channel was deleted. Help. I deeply appreciate that. So. Like it even better if you do pay and subscribe, but you don't have to. And if you don't mind, subscribe here. And for that, everybody, thank you so much.
We can